Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, November 28th, 2022. It's approximately 1 p.m. Happy anniversary to my parents. It would have been their 70th anniversary today if my dad had been alive, so yeah. My parents. If you please join me in the pledge, please. Away from us. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to have our pet of the week, Amy DeFelix. I'm sorry, did I pronounce that okay? DeFelix from the Animal Services Board, or the ASCMV.
Would I be able to find it here in City Council?
I'll probably try work sessions.
Work sessions.
Try that one.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Alrighty, hello, I am Amy DeFelix with the Animal Services Center of the Messiah Valley. Here are both of our pets of the week, our dog and cat of the week, starting with our cat. Her name is Meredith, her ASC number is 53781, and here's what she has to say. I'm a calm and elegant girl who loves the finer things in life, pets and cuddles. I like making biscuits in your lap when I'm feeling happy, and if you listen closely enough, you can hear my quiet purr. I'm hardly ever too loud, so if you need a quieter companion who is still sweet and affectionate, I'm the one for you. And our dog of the week, his name is Ted. His ASC number is 48011, and he says that he's ready for a if you're ready for a fun-loving, good-looking boy who knows how to have a good time, look no further. I'm so interested in everything, and I love playing all day. I need a family to help guide and direct my energy into healthy outlets like long walks, rugged toys, or treat puzzles, but I promise that it's worth it for my love and affection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, next is going to be Giselle Palomares from the Workforce Connections, going to be presenting the jobs of the week.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. All right, for the jobs of this week, we have City of Las Cruces is hiring for an Inspector General. They're paying $85,000 to $124,000 a year, open until filled. We have White Sands Missile Range, who is hiring for a food and beverage attendant. That pays $16 an hour, and it closes December 29th. Admiral Beverage Corporation is hiring a night warehouse laborer that pays $22,000 to $30,000 depending on experience, and closes February 17th of 2023. First National Bank Texas is hiring a bilingual personal banker, and that pays $30,000 to $38,000 depending on experience, and that closes February 16th of 2023. The Salvation Army is hiring a seasonal bell ringer that pays $11.50 an hour, and that closes December 8th. And Tresco is hiring a developmental specialist, and that pays between 14 hours to $19 an hour, depending on experience, and that closes on December 15th. For a full list of jobs, you can please go to las-cruces.org or employnm.com. And as always, you can always connect with the New Mexico Workforce Connection by calling them at 575-524-6250, or you can visit them in person at 226 South Alameda Boulevard, Las Cruces, New Mexico. And you can always visit them at their webpage, employnm.com, as well as download the app. Thank you, Mayor.
Giselle,
Mr. Mayor?
can you just state your name for the record?
Yes, Giselle Palomares of New Mexico Workers Commission.
May
Sorry.
I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Ms. Palomares?
Yes.
How much does the Inspector General, what is the range of pay?
I have $85K to $124.
Yikes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have two items on the agenda. First one is the 3.1 Sustainability Quarterly Update, and Lisa LaRock, our Sustainability Coordinator, will be presenting.
Nope. I think I'm opening them up the wrong place, aren't I? I've never had to go first, so I'm looking for where they are located. Anybody? Do you know where they are? At the bottom. Sorry. No. Council presentations. Council. These?
Work sessions? Work sessions, and then 2022.
11. Cheese and beans. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and people in the audience. My name is Lisa LaRocque. Besides being IT dysfunctional, I am the Sustainability Officer for the City of Las Cruces. And I'm very happy to be first. It's a new experience for me, as evidenced by me not finding the folder. So I have been asked to provide a quarterly report for you, mostly on the climate action plan, but other areas related to sustainability. And Jenny Hernandez, the sustainability specialist, and I will be sharing building electrification with you today. So the first thing I wanted to do is give a global overview. In the last couple weeks, the United Nations Convention on Climate Change had a meeting, now is the COP27 in Egypt. And one of the things that they concluded after this meeting is that our need to mitigate climate change is more urgent than ever, that the technology is available and that it's more sophisticated than ever, but that market forces globally aren't going to be enough to make the changes with the speed that we need it, although the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be helpful in that area for the United States, and that policy has to drive the change, and that the investments have to be to 3 to 6 times higher. So with that sense of urgency, we've tried to step up. To remind you about the Climate Action Plan, we did an inventory in 2018. And in that inventory, we created a percentage pie here, and we will be focusing on the building sector, which is both the commercial and the residential. And together, those two blue slices of the pie are 38% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So they're a significant part of why, what the citywide we're doing to contribute to greenhouse gases. The 53% of those two blue-colored pies are the greenhouse gases that come from emissions from electricity in 2018. And 44% of the pies, the commercial and residential pies, are emissions that come from natural gas. So when we were developing the Climate Action Plan, we came up with several different strategies to try to address the building sector. The first 3 strategies that we came up with were for energy efficiency. So we tackled either municipal, residential, or commercial sectors, and we had a goal for 2030, and we have a goal for 2050. And they're different percentages, but they all, on an average, are about 25%. And you'll see that a 25% reduction in energy use was our goal. But that doesn't amount to as much in greenhouse gases, because the most you can do with the most that can happen with energy efficiency is you can reduce buildings' energy load by 10 to 20%, because you're just making something more efficient. You're still using the same equipment that you used, or the same types of equipment that you use, but you're making it more more efficient in some areas. The fourth strategy that we came up with is building decarbonization. And what that does is it decreases the greenhouse gases to ultimately to zero. So how can we do that? One of the reasons that we can do that is because there's the New Mexico Energy Transition Act that requires that utilities use renewable and carbon-free fuels by 2045, and so they're going down and with different milestones in 2025 and 2030 and 2040. So over the course of time, by the time we reach 2025, any electricity that we use will not have carbon in it because the utilities are mandated to only generate electricity from carbon-free sources, from renewable energy. And then concurrently, as we electrify buildings, we're also removing natural gas from new construction. And then that too would increase the amount of electricity and then decrease the amount of natural gas as we go towards electrifying and decarbonizing buildings. And beyond that, the idea of electrifying more buildings will actually help us reach our greenhouse gas emissions more quickly because we will be removing natural gas from that sector. And it will also improve the resiliency of buildings because, especially for low and moderate income people, because they're the new, sophisticated, energy efficient, and subsidized appliances and HVAC systems that they'll be getting will be ones that assure that their household temperatures are safe in extreme weather events and that their bills will be decreased because of the energy efficiency of these new types of appliances. And with that, I'll let Jenny take a deeper dive into the different strategies that we're doing.
Thanks, Lisa.
Mayor, Council, Jenny Hernandez, a sustainability specialist for the record. And so, as Lisa explained, one of the goals that'll help us achieve our building decarbonization in the CAP is having to do with proposed code amendments. So if you remember, almost about a year ago, we brought forward the resolution for all city buildings to be all electric. And the guidance given was to create something similar for citywide. So we are currently working on that. However, we are taking an approach that we are proposing for the code amendments to be electric ready. So I'll dive into exactly what that means. So what we're currently doing is we've contracted New Buildings Institute, which is the consultant that has many years of experience working with other cities to do something similar. And so we've really asked them to achieve 3 goals in this draft amendment of codes. And that is first to take our current code, what we currently use and follow, and just insert electric readiness. So electric readiness means that you can essentially plug and play when you are ready to convert to an all-electric home. So that just means taking your panel. Most homes, older homes, have a 120 volt panel. And so what this code would say is now you have to put a 240 volt in it. And that just means that if you want to get an EV later, it has the capacity to let you put a charger in for your EV. If you want to switch, say, your gas water heater to an electric heat pump, it has the capacity on the panel to do that. So that's one of the components we've asked them to do. The second thing was to take a look at energy efficient concepts that have high impact and that are cost effective. And so what they've done is they've looked at IECC 2021, and IECC is the International Energy Conservation Code. And they've taken those components that are cost impact and cost effective with high impact, and sprinkle it into the proposed code. So there's a few, so I'll give you an example. One of them is having to do with light sensors. So they've added that to that piece of it. And the last thing we've asked them to do is to create a stretch code. Stretch code means that it's voluntary. It's an extra step beyond what is required. And that stretch code means that we've had them write it in a way that is all electric. So that means that everything in the house runs on all electric. And the reason that we did this is to match it or align it with the Inflation Reduction Act, because the Inflation Reduction Act has monies that people can qualify for if they build all electric or as they start to transition to all electric. So I'm going to show you some examples on that, but before I move to that slide, again, I just want to clarify that base code is what is mandatory. So that's kind of the first two levels you'll see on there. Stretch codes are voluntary, so it's not mandatory. If they want, they can meet those voluntary stretch codes, and it's highly encouraged and incentivized through the IRA. And this only pertains to all new construction. And the commercial stretch code is what the city will adopt as the minimum requirements for our city buildings, which again is that last component that is all electric.
Excuse
And
me,
so-
Jenny, before
yes.
you go further, can you, just for clarification for council, members of the public, those watching at home on TV, can you, right now, when a person's building a new home, they're usually, of course, electrical outlets, and then there's usually gas as well? And so, and of course, there's the breaker box and all that. Can you kind of, from that, I forget what they call it when they at that stage when they're building the house. Can you kind of transition and just share with us what exactly changes at that level?
Of course, Mayor. So what would change is that the only thing I would have to change is your panel. So it goes from, right now it's 120, so I would put a 240 in at new construction. And then I would run the conduits and the wiring to be ready for an electric charger. And the same thing, I would run it for your stove. So it'll still have natural gas, but it'll have everything prepared for if I want to put in an electric or induction stovetop. And so that's all it's doing. It's preparing everything. So if you want to switch, you can, but we're not taking out gas right now. So that's all it'll be.
Thank you.
Of course. And so, to the mayor's point, what exactly does that look like when we say we want to align it with the IRA funding that is coming down? So I have two scenarios here to kind of give you an idea of what that means, and then I'll give you a very specific example of how it'll qualify for builders and developers. So the first two columns, the first column you'll see is this is if you are low income to moderate income based on the average medium household income. And so there are rebates for low to moderate income, and you have the potential to get up to $14,000 in rebates. Again, rebates is point of sale, either discount or refund money that you will receive. Then the second column is tax credits, right? So that you have to wait until the end of the year to get that tax credit. But the tax credit can be doubled with the rebate in this instance. So if I am low to moderate income, I can get the rebate of $4,000 for my electrical panel, and then at the end of the year, still get $600 for tax credits. I want to point out that these are caps, so this is the most I can get, and if you fall in between that moderate income, you have the potential to get half of those costs covered. And if I am low to moderate income, you get 100% of those costs covered. And so you'll see that under the tax credit columns, I have varies, because if you're moderate income, it'll just depend on your income what the qualifying tax credit amount is. And then the last column is for folks who are above medium income. And so they will most likely, well, they will only qualify for tax credits and none of the rebates. And so you'll see, though, that because they don't get any of the rebates, they get more of the tax credit qualifications. And so this, again, depends on the income above the medium income. And so essentially what the codes are doing is preparing folks to be able to get some of this. And specifically for our builders and developers, we've really curated the stretch code, which again is voluntary, to streamline them to get this funding. And so if you are constructing new residential homes, you can get up to $5,000 if you meet the requirements for the DOE Zero Energy Ready homes, which is what we've aligned the voluntary stretch codes to follow. So if you follow those stretch codes, you will be meeting the DOE Zero Energy Ready homes. And so you'll see here that that's $5,000 per unit. And if you're building commercial buildings, you still are able for a tax credit that just varies a little bit more because it depends on the energy savings that you're getting versus meeting specific requirements. And then so this yellow chart is just the same thing but explained with numbers. So you'll get up to $2,500 if you meet the EPA Energy Star, and then if you go all the way to the DOE, you'll get that $5,000 rebate. And so all of this again is connected to the codes, but as we move forward, we have other initiatives to help with specifically with this, and I'm going to pass it back to Lisa to cover that.
So real quick, Jenny, I don't know if you know the answer to this. So
Yes.
these are federal tax credits, of
Correct.
course. Are there any from the state that you're aware of?
That's a great question, Mayor. Yes, there are some from the state that I have not included here, but there are, it's called the Sustainable Building Tax Credit that qualifies you to get tax credits, not rebates, but tax credits for essentially doing this. So on top of this money, you can also qualify for state money, which is the Sustainable Building Tax Credit, and we also have local rebates through El Paso Electric that will qualify you for some of these things as well.
So the credit is primarily credit on your tax return with the state?
Correct.
Okay. And can you, and I know you mentioned what it is, but what is the stretch code again?
The stretch code is basically, say I'm building a new home, and obviously I have to follow our codes, right? And so I follow it, but I want to go beyond what's required in just the code. And this stretch code serves as a guidance to help them. Like if I want to go beyond electric ready and I want to go all electric, this tells you how to do that and pairs it with the funding for them to qualify for.
Thank you. Oh, Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for your presentation. So these are credits that go to the prospective new home owner, is that correct? So how does that work in terms, I mean, what if there's a prospective buyer who says, I really don't want to buy a house that, so does this adhere also to the builder and then passes on to does it adhere to the builder and then it passes on to the buyer? How does that work?
Councilor Flores, great question. So the rebates are mostly for retrofits of housing. So I, as the homeowner, would get that. But if I am building new homes and I build them to these requirements, I, the builder, would be able to get the tax credit, not the rebate, but the tax credit. Now, the $1 million question that we are still unclear about is if I buy a home that the builder has constructed to these requirements and I move in, can I still get the $14,000 rebate or the tax credits because these items exist in my home that I have now purchased? And that we are unclear about. My best estimation is that the $14,000 you will not be able to qualify for because in the wording in the policy, it says when you switch out a gas for an electric. And because I bought the home as is, I'm going to say that you cannot qualify for the rebates. But what's unclear is that if I can still qualify for the tax credits after I've moved into a new home that is constructed to these standards.
So since we're looking at this as to potential codification, right? So are we going to get things that, more information that's clearer on that?
Councilor Flores, yes, as it's moving through, our hope is to bring this to a working session in February to you for specifically once we're done with the draft code proposal. And by that time, at the federal level, there should be more clarifications because you should be able to tap into this funding by January.
Okay.
So yes.
And then as far as COP27 goes, I get some weekly reports from the League of Women Voters, and there was some concern that we have actually fallen back in terms of catching up with our goals that I was aware of at COP23, which was 5 years ago. So are the steps that we are taking playing that catch-up game, or are we, how are we contributing to the I should say, that goal that we haven't achieved as expected back in 2017?
Councilor Flores, I'm
You're
going
gonna
to
let
pass it on
Lisa?
to Lisa. Yes.
Yeah, Lisa's the one. No, thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Jenny. Lisa Lurak again. So the answer to the question definitively, Mayor and Councilor Flores, is that we're planning an inventory next year to be able to actually measure the progress that we've made. But I will say that from our work with all the different contractors that we've engaged, and I'll tell you about in a second with the next slide, that we have gotten a lot of positive feedback that we are very forward-thinking and taking actions and codifying actions that are still aren't being, that's very important and not being done in a lot of different cities. So in terms of New Mexico, we'll be the first city to ask for codifying this. And towards that, I'd like to move to the last slide and give you the whole picture of what we're doing. In terms of really trying to make an impact on building decarbonization or electrification, we're doing several different things to prepare the industry and residents about electrification adoption. One of the things is that we're doing is we're going to be giving a full-day construction industry training on the technologies that are available now, the codes that we're proposing that are aligned with the IRA rebates, the technologies, and the codes, obviously, and then we're also preparing a lot of additional materials that are research and numerically based. One about the myths and facts that people have about electrification in new construction, and whether or not those hearsay sorts of pieces of information that you've heard are actually myth or fact. We are doing a cost analysis for construction with a tax credit, so we'll actually be able to show the true bottom line to the construction industry. They have the prerogative of building houses and just following the basic code, or they can see if they did the stretch code with the tax credit that they get and some other choices that they make, that in fact that this would be a selling point for people, since it's the longest term investment that you have. And then there's another analysis that we're doing as a life cycle cost, so not just the initial cost of the appliance or the HVAC system, but looking at it over the life of the appliance or infrastructure and how that ultimately saves money. And we've seen that done in different national and regional markets, but we're working with NBI again to take that analysis at a local level so it's pertinent to what we're doing. We're also putting in some public workshops that we're offering on January 20th and 21st at the Power Up Las Cruces Expo and Training. And we have volunteers that are helping us with an exhibitors expo with all the manufacturers and installers. And we have a website and ongoing research, and ongoing outreach rather, with that. So we're really trying to make a concerted effort to move adoption of going electric because of the fact that that energy source is moving to a zero carbon base, that we feel that this is the best way to make that large impact on what our goals are for the Climate Action Plan. So with that, we'll stand for questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Councillor Graham? It won't light up.
Oh my God, have I been recalled? This is how they tell you. Thank you. Sorry for that technological snafu. That was kind of weird. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks so much, Lisa and Jenny. I always really enjoy your presentations. If we could go back to slide 6, please. Thanks. So just to make sure I understand, when you say the rebates are primarily aimed at retrofits, so that would mean existing homes, these are not new constructions, so like my house that I live in, if I went through the upgrades, then these are the rebates for which I, as an existing homeowner, would apply.
Mayor, Councilor Beta, don't want to go into your personal
Graham,
life.
but that's cool, but I am on her mic.
Oh, you're right. You know, you get a little nervous up here. I do know who you are.
No, you're all good.
What are you doing on her mic? No, just, yeah, what's up with that? So, sorry. If your income was below the median income, yes, you would qualify for all those rebates.
Okay, great.
If your income is above that, for much of that, you get a tax credit. You would be able to travel in the third lane, and but you can it reboots. You can spend money and get tax. You don't have to do everything in 1 year for one-time 30% tax credit. You can parse it out over several years.
Okay, great. Thank you. That clears it up. And those of my colleagues and you, Lisa and Jenny, who share space with me in the Transportation, Sustainability, and Infrastructure PRC have already heard this line of thought. But I urge us all to remain mindful of the idea that rebates are wonderful, but it also means you have to have the cash in hand out the start to be able to make the upgrades. And for a lot of folks, that may not be possible. So what are the best practices that we can look at, especially at the local level, to help empower people, to make that possible?
Mayor, Councilor Graham, there are two different factors that, well, there are multiple strategies towards that. One of them is that it's an instant rebate at the time of sale.
Oh,
so
great.
you get the money immediately. If there is some sort of upfront costs that occur, there are some other areas that are available through our local banks or through a green bank, which is actually a loan program where you have a short-term loan because you know that the money is guaranteed,
Okay.
and then you pass it on that way. But most often, they are trying to be very sensitive to that. The idea of a tax credit, though, is problematic if you don't end up
Right.
having money that you owe that's deducted. And that is one that we continue to challenge, but I think it really shows that the $14,000, we've calculated a full retrofit, and it's about $22,000 for installation and cost of appliances. Is that right? 23,000. So that's a lot.
But that's really good to hear that there's instant rebate and some local options, because I know the navigating the state and federal process can be difficult. So I'm glad to hear that there's something here locally.
And Mayor, Councilor Graham, we are also aware of how challenging it has been to navigate even this learning curve for us, and we're trying to look for a way to set aside funding to provide advocates, counselors, to work with the LMI community to help them navigate this whole thing with assistance.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Coran?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa and Jenny. This was great. And also, just for the record, if they meant to recall one of us, I suspect it was me, so there's clearly confusion on the part of the mics. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much for presenting today and for coming to TSI and giving us kind of the grounding for this conversation. I do want to just really appreciate you all for the ways that you're thinking about this and giving us an opportunity to give feedback from the TSI committee as well. I did want to just note one possible follow-up. We are having another TSI PRC meeting next Tuesday here, and the one part of that, a small part of the TSI PRC, will actually be a presentation from El Paso Electric to talk about the very specific short-term immediate rebates and discounts that people in the community can get. So we're trying to kind of dissipate that information in every way that we possibly can, less on the builder end and more on the consumer end, but we will have that presentation at 8:30 next Tuesday morning in the conference room upstairs. So just to add to the dissipation of the information and hopefully get more folks engaged as much as possible. So thank you again.
Councilor Bencomo?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you both so much for the presentation. On your next slide, yes, where you talked about tax credit for contractors, often when we make decisions regarding impact fees or anything that is related to contractors, the go-to sort of talking point is, well, the contractor is just going to pass it on to the consumer, right? They're just going to pass it on to the home buyer. I'm curious about how this, imagine this $5,000 per unit is the cap, as Jenny said. I'm just curious if you can speak to that, like if you've seen this before, if this is something that's going to be really great for contractors. I mean, it seems excellent for me, and so I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about addressing that concern that often contractors have in terms of, how we make it expensive for them to do business.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, that's a really great question. So 45L and 1790, to be specific, are already actually existing tax credits The only thing is that they've increased it by a lot. And so, and obviously to coincide with that, is that they've adopted the requirements to meet the goals that are aligned with reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So currently 45L and 17.9D standards are not as, I guess you could say, energy efficient. And so what they've done is they've increased that pot of money, but they've also made the standards to ensure that it will be cost effective, give energy efficiency, and as Lisa was mentioning, really over the lifetime ensuring that it is worthwhile to do that. So those standards will be aligned to meet those goals, and so all they've done is increase the money for this bucket. So I would argue that it's probably more appealing than how the current tax credit stands.
Awesome, Jenny. Thank you so much for your analysis. Thanks, Mayor.
Anybody else? Okay, there's quite a few members of the public here. Were any of you here had any questions on this presentation? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes, if you want to come forward, we'll give you 3 minutes. Just state your name, please. Yeah, we can't take any comment from back there. We have to pick you up on the recorder. Sorry. And I just need you to state your name, please.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with any of the protocol here, but my question is my first time here. So,
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, my name is Sue Riva, and my question is, where can we find all this information for the public so that we can study these things a little bit more carefully? That's all.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
Mayor, Council, and Ms. Arriba, thank you for the opportunity to say again that on January 20th and 21st of 2023, we'll be hosting a expo and training at the Las Cruces Convention Center. And then we will also be putting up a website that will have all this material. We'll be training some people to help the low and moderate income community navigate these different sites. And there's one more. And there's a training specifically for the public from at the expo called Rewiring America that helps with that. And we also hope to have some additional trainings, if possible, kind of riffing off Lush and Lean, not ripping, riffing, and to do some local discussions with folks about the advantages of that opportunity. And we'll be talking more about that in a upcoming work session.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa.
I have another question.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Lisa and Jenny. As far as the January 2020 and 21 event, will you also have information regarding the income levels that are considered low, median, or medium, whatever, high? And just generally, do you know what they are offhand at this point?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, it depends on the number of people in the household, so it gets a little bit more complicated. But we will have exhibitors that will have that information and be able to walk you through the rebates, as well as having, in our training, we'll have sessions that just deal with that in a much deeper dive. It's not simple, there's no doubt about it, but we want to get in the front of the queue to be able to take advantage of as much money as we can.
Okay, and then I have an ask, or Who do I ask? Oh, our acting city manager, Enrique. I have an ask for the city manager, for city management. We really need to get this word out to the people, just to the residents of Las Cruces. And I think a lot of our older homes, I think most of them are, well, what do I know? But there are Spanish-speaking people, Spanish-speaking only residents. And if this could be a programmatic announcement in our newspaper or submit to the newspaper, and we don't have a newspaper, but the city, the Sun News or whatever, just to let people know that this is coming, because that's about, 6 weeks away at this point, or less. So if we could get that information out regularly through our radio stations and to have bilingual people there, that would be very helpful and I think effective, and I think that people will be responsive. The more education, the more information they have.
Mayor, Councilor Flores, we have hired a marketing team to help us get the word out, and it's just starting to ramp up now. We're kind of competing with the holidays, but the idea of having bilingual staff there is certainly an important one to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Good suggestion there, Councilor. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. Thank you, Jenny. Next item is going to be item 3.2, City of Las Cruces Tree Care Ordinance. Franco Granillo will be presenting. Oh, there you are.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council, Franco Granillo, Parks and Recreation. We're here to discuss our proposal or our guidelines for our tree ordinance policy that we'd like to implement. But before we get started, I'd like to point out some people in the crowd that have been a huge part of this. So some of our internal partners, of course, Rhonda with Water Conservation, will work with her regarding our plantings and water savings. Of course, Lisa with our sustainability, so we can make sure to have a continued program for tree canopy increasing. And also Kathy Matthews, our landscape architect, because she also assists big time when it comes to review and design review for neighborhoods and plantings when we accept a new piece of property. And also one of the most important parts of our tree care ordinance and policies and procedures is our tree stewards. We have several of them here right now. And if you'd like to stand or wave, so you can be acknowledged, we really appreciate all your help. We wouldn't be able to do as much as we do without them. We have a lot of staff that we plant with, but these are the people that help us year-round. And also Mr. Fensky, Mr. Finley, and Mr. White. We kind of bounce ideas off them, and they give us some of our best practices that we use to this day. So before I get started, we also have Alyssa O'Brien. She's she comes from the State Forestry Office, and she's a Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager. So she's going to discuss the many benefits of trees, and how this ordinance can really help us as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Franco. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors, for having me here. As Franco stated, I am Alyssa O'Brien with New Mexico State Forestry. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager for the state. All right, great. All right, so just briefly in summary, what I'm gonna speak about is kind of trees protect us and that we need to protect them. What exactly are Las Cruces trees providing for Las Cruces? What are those benefits? I'm going to kind of overview the economic, infrastructure, health, environmental, community benefits that these trees are providing. And then why do they need protection? Why can't they just stand alone and be themselves? And how can an ordinance be the thing that's going to be protecting them? So first off, And one of the benefits is the economic benefit of Las Cruces' trees. This is based off of a 2014 study done in Las Cruces by Davey Tree and State Forestry, but it was estimated that the structural value of all of Las Cruces' trees was $205 million, so I can only imagine it's gone up since then, with the value of money. And this is the market cost of the tree if you cut down all the trees in Las Cruces and then had to replace them. So that's how much it would cost. But that's just the market cost, so that's just the cost that it would cost to go to a local landscaper and have these trees put back in. There are so many other benefits, economic benefits, that trees provide that are not part of their purchase price. So if you buy a tree, you're really getting a great investment. Each tree provides about $31,000 in benefits that are not part of its purchase price. So next time you're at the store, looking at a $100 tree, like 31, it's a really great return on investment. It's about $450 on average. And the kind of benefits that are involved in this I'm going to kind of go over, but they're one of the few pieces of infrastructure that actually appreciates and doesn't depreciate over time, if you take care of it correctly. So some of these benefits that are not caught up in the purchase price, this is from the 2014 study, so again, it might have changed slightly since then. It shows that Las Cruces' trees are removing a lot of the city's air pollution. About 92 tons of air pollution. 45 tons of that is in ozone. Trees are able to intercept and hold small particles on their surface and then absorb gas pollution. So if you go past a tree that's located along a busy highway and you touch the leaves, a lot of times you'll come away with a black coating on your hand. But that's black coating is something that's being absorbed by the trees and filtered by the trees, not in your lungs. A study by the Nature Conservancy here showed that one tree can remove between 7 to 24% of the pollution around it. So rather than having little HEPA air filters all along your highway, tree looks much nicer. Globally, the World Health Organization estimated that 90% of global urban dwellers were exposed to these particulates, and that globally it causes 3 million premature deaths. They are estimating that by 2050, that will globally be 6.2 million lives. So not necessarily in Las Cruces, but they're doing lots of good. And then the value of carbon sequestration, this is for Las Cruces, is 17,800 tons of carbon is sequestered, so kind of stored in those trees. And that's only going to become more and more relevant. It's a current hot topic that one of our billionaires recently posted on Twitter that he was going to give $1 million for the best carbon storage device, and one of the best carbon storage devices is trees. And so people responded back on Twitter saying, it's trees, and he donated his $1 million to tree planting. So not a high-tech solution, carbon sequestration, just plant a tree. Trees also provide lower energy costs, kind of dovetailing with the last presentation, and carbon emission reductions. Just for the city of Las Cruces, in 2014, it totaled about $600,000. That's only going to increase as temperatures rise and rising energy costs. But basically what's happening is there's lowered energy costs for businesses and homes that have trees planted around them that are insulating the homes and also providing shading benefits. Trees also provide considerable rainwater and stormwater volume and pollution control through rainfall interception and intensity reduction, stormwater infiltration and uptake facilitation, and nutrient load reduction. So a lot of words, but urban stormwater is usually moved away really quickly to prevent flooding in our cities. Super important. However, moving these large quantities of untreated urban stormwater to downstream water sources like Rio Grande, you often lose water. So you're just kind of funneling all that water. You decrease the water quality and you increase treatment costs further down the road as it just picks more pollutants up in those channels. Instead, with trees, the canopy can intercept rain, delaying the runoff to storm drains, allows the stormwater control system to work more efficiently, and reduces the chances of it becoming overwhelmed. For the city of Las Cruces, it was in 2014, about 898,000 cubic feet of runoff that the trees were able to process, and they were able to reduce the stormwater intensity by 25 to 70%, depending on the tree canopy where they were. And then also the tree roots condition the soil to help increase the infiltration of water into the soil, so kind of slowing it down like a sponge rather than just running off. This increases its ability to store greater volumes of water. So you're not just losing that water by having it run off into your river and further down the system, you're actually kind of keeping the water in the system for you to use. And that amount that was shown to be stored was in Las Cruces between 69 to 350% more water was stored underneath these trees than areas that were comparable with bare ground. All right, so the health benefits of trees. This is an amazing fact that I feel like everyone should know. Heat is the leading weather-related killer in the US, even more so than hurricanes, fires, tornadoes. We think of these big natural disasters that FEMA pays for. And I mean, they're huge national tragedies, but heat is like the silent killer. It's the leading killer of people that you're just not hearing about because these people don't have voices a lot of the times, and it's just not spoken up. It's not as dramatic and FEMA can't necessarily come and have a heat emergency. But in urban areas, the issue is even more kind of urgent. Urban structures such as buildings, roads, other infrastructure absorb and then re-emit the sun's heat more than natural landscapes such as forests and water bodies. You've probably seen that even if you just walk through a park. The park is often just feels a lot cooler. If you walk through some of our beautiful state and national forests, it just feels a lot cooler than when you're in the parking lot. A lot of the trees around here still have their green leaves. You go a little ways up into the mountains, all the leaves are gone. So these urban areas where these structures are highly concentrated and greenery is limited become islands of higher temperature relative to outlying areas. And this is for Las Cruces. Daytime temperatures were between 1 to 18 degrees higher than temperatures in outlying areas. And then the nighttime temperatures were about 2 to 5 degrees higher. So they just kind of hold on to that heat. This is really especially relevant to Las Cruces because this is 2018 mapping, so more recently, showed that all of the city had dangerously high average temperatures of 93 to 107 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was just the average for annual temperatures, so that's a really high average annual temperature. When temperatures are this warm, it does become a health issue. But on the bright side, trees, every 10% increase in your overall tree canopy generates a 2-degree reduction in ambient heat. So trees are able to provide this health, this cooling benefit by providing shade, releasing water vapor, and then reducing your air conditioning costs by 30%. So they are able to, often when you go into the shade, and this was particular to Las Cruces, the areas were 20 to 45 degrees cooler, which is a huge, huge difference, especially if it's 90 degrees. If you go somewhere it's 100 degrees and it's 80 degrees in the shade, that's life-saving. So those are kind of the benefits of the trees. And now why they need protection. Why can't we just leave the trees be where they are and hope all will be good. So this is kind of a summary of Las Cruces' tree cover. Canopy cover is the measure that's kind of the standard that's used to determine how a city is doing, to kind of compare different cities, to compare municipalities, and how they're doing to reduce their heat island effect and providing shade for the residents. The general metric that towns across America strive for is 30%. And I'm sorry, there's a little sticky note on there. 30% with impervious surfaces being as low as possible. So 30% cover of trees, which is a little bit difficult to achieve here in the arid Southwest. I do have to acknowledge that. It's a lot easier if you go Pacific Northwest or East Coast. But the land use study from 2014 showed Las Cruces' tree cover was at 4%, with impervious surface being 30% and bare ground being 54%. So lots of areas potentially for trees. Potentially. And then looking at maps from 2018, the tree cover was at 12%. So definitely it's improving, or it was either measured differently, but it's still a ways to go. Just in kind of comparison, throughout our state, Albuquerque is at 14%, Carlsbad is at 16%, and Santa Fe is at 18%. But those places are also don't get as high of temperatures, so they don't necessarily need it as much as Las Cruces, potentially. So the trees need our protection. Ordinances are kind of the way that you can get there. What ordinances do are they protect and enhance all these tree benefits that Las Cruces currently has. Went on the wrong one. So they kind of set standards to help you protect, maintain, and increase your tree canopy. So protecting what you have, maintaining what you have, and then also hopefully increasing getting more. They also provide for a healthier forest by setting standards for where you can place trees. And then they also can have increased safety because if you're placing the trees in the right places, there's less issues with hazards and tree failure later on. Improved quality of community. I would rather be in an area that has a lot of trees. I'm probably special, but they've shown that people will spend 30% more at stores that have tree-lined canopies. They've shown that housing prices go up if there's more trees. It's usually depends on the area, but for New Mexico as a whole, it's about $30,000 is what average house price goes up by if you put just a tree in the front yard. Lowered costs for energy, and then the ordinance itself would make it collaborative, easier for departments in the community to work together, having less conflict. So there would be an authority that would be able to kind of hold accountable the trees, hold accountable people's actions towards the trees. There we go. And kind of have standards for how your community's trees are dealt with. So if someone decides to go to a city park and chop down a tree, they would be able to be held accountable. If they decide to go and plant a tree, they would also be held accountable. So. Okay. And then other ways that ordinances can protect and enhance all these tree benefits. For street tree ordinances, which I believe is what we're proposing initially, is kind of the publicly owned trees, setting a model example of tree care. These set standards that help maintain healthy trees through good maintenance and cultural practices. They set the responsibility for trees with one department or person so that management can be coordinated to eliminate conflicts, waste, inefficiency, management of trees. This often happens where one person plants a tree and then another person mows it over, or no one knows whose responsibility it is to take care of that tree. So that kind of eliminates a lot of this waste and inefficiency that often happens. Landscape standards also can be used to control privately owned trees, following the model set by street tree ordinance standards. That could include excluded species, so species that are on our state banned list. Currently, how it stands, we have invasive species that you're not supposed to plant as a state, but if you don't have a city ordinance, there's nothing that you can do really to stop a private landowner from going and planting a bunch of invasive trees or doing cultural practices that might not necessarily be good for the city as a whole. So having a tree that could potentially harbor a dangerous pest or something like that. Ordinances can also be specific to preserving or protecting your existing trees. So I was talking about people going into your city parks and just chopping down a tree or running into a tree with their vehicle. Ordinances can help to increase tree cover by putting limits so that trees are protected or are an important component in design. For new development, they can also provide limits or checks on development so that canopy cover is maintained while still encouraging responsible development. Trees can also be integrated into other ordinances that protect important areas or provide important services, such as providing a buffer around a river or a buffer around a busy highway to kind of stop that pollution or erosion control protection. And these buffers can protect views, noises, or sensitive waterways by mandating that trees are left or planted after the fact, after these roads are put in. And then kind of a last side benefit of an ordinance is that Tree City USA is a national recognition program that publicly demonstrates commitment to the environment and pride of community. One of their requirements is they have several requirements, but one of the big ones, is that your city needs to have a tree ordinance. And then the other ones are fun. They're just like, you have to have a tree celebration and things like that. That would be super easy for Las Cruces, hopefully, to get. But the number one, the kind of the biggest hurdle is having that ordinance in place, and that just shows that you're a community that's really committed to the environment, committed to being proud of living in that community and having trees there. So I listed some of the other tree cities that New Mexico has, and Texas. So El Paso, 14 years, Carlsbad, 12, Santa Fe, 11, and Albuquerque, 23. So they've all had these ordinances in place for quite a while and been tree cities for quite a while. And so some of the benefits that can come with that, you can get free trees. It's a national recognition program, so you're on their website. And it's just a good kind of way to be recognized. You get a big sign that you can put underneath your, as you come into town, recognizing that you're a tree city. And these are some of the other cities in your area that have ordinances, just to kind of, you're not alone, and that there's other people that we can look to kind of give guidance and to provide models and ask questions, which we have been doing for how their ordinances are working out. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask, I know when I had discussed with this a while back with EFO about a tree ordinance, I guess I was envisioning more of how we can add to more trees in the city. So this was very interesting as far as the caring of trees, but do we have a presentation on how we can envision expanding our tree canopy in the city? Was that worked on at all? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about downtown, with the shade and how we can maybe look at adding larger trees there. But what other areas, like maybe the multi-use paths, some of the parks? So,
Mayor, council members, that's a good question. This ordinance is going to provide guidance on a lot of different items regarding tree care and tree planting. When it comes to adding more trees, this ordinance will discuss planting the right tree in the right place. We have to make sure that we don't have any utilities on top or on bottom of a tree. We have to make sure that the tree is able to thrive in the planter or in the section that it's going to be planted in. So looking at those kinds of things, especially with the property that we currently have, this is going to help guide us in adding more trees in the city. And we're also looking at doing some things where we can increase the tree canopy on private property because we're running out of property on city property in our public parks. The reason is if we plant too many trees in our public parks, we're going to shade out the turf, and we'll make our uniform our irrigation not uniform because it's going to hit trees instead of turf. So we're looking at all those things, and also the more trees we plant, the more difficult it is to mow. So we have to make sure that we have things in a really good balance regarding turf and tree planting. But this ordinance will discuss the opportunities to increase our tree canopy in several different areas with the property that we do maintain and that we own right now. I have a presentation on my own to go over right now with Jimmy's assistance, so maybe that will answer some of your questions as we move along.
I do have a preliminary question.
You have a question, Councilor?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Granillo Franco, so you keep referring to this ordinance. Is this something that, who's proposing it, who's drafting it? Is that what you're going to do right now? Is that what you're going to present, a proposed ordinance?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, what we're looking at doing right now is providing information to show what we'd like to have in the ordinance. And as the city's going through ordinance, I guess, maintenance right now and upgrading our ordinances. So once all those ordinances are in the books, we'd like to add this as well, but it's going to have to go through several reads so it can be approved. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now, just providing some information on what we'd like to have in our ordinance with your approval.
Yeah, down the road,
Yes.
It'll come back to us for a vote.
Yes.
But
It has to go through
insofar,
resolution.
I'm just curious about imposing this on builders, developers, or builders, I suppose. Would it extend to them?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, right now, we're just looking to get this done on our property, on public property. Anything regarding private property, construction, or, a store, we're looking at that down the road. But what this will help with as well is when a contractor is working on our property or developing something for us, they're going to know what trees to plant based on the space that they have and the soil that they have. So it's not like we're tying them down to anything, but they're going to have, along with our ordinances and our we're going to try and provide a menu that they can pick from to plant trees in a location that will thrive.
Well, on private property, this isn't legal advice or anything like that, but the fact that it is a health and safety issue, it might fly. That would be for our city attorney's office to determine. But I think that that is something we should be looking at, because there is just so much development going on north of 70, south of 70, and eastward on. And I think, hopefully our legal department or the information you're coming across will cover that, because that's something that we're very concerned about. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor and Councilor Flores, with these ordinances and with our standards, a lot of this will be hammered out during the ordinance process, but also we're going to have to speak with codes because they may need assistance enforcing these items as well. So we need to check that everything and that everyone has the proper resources to get this done.
Thank you, Mr. Granillo. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, this will be our, Mayor and members of council, this is going to be our city portion of the presentation that discusses some of the tree care items that we're looking at accomplishing, and it will discuss a little bit about Tree City USA as well. So as Alyssa mentioned, why it's very important to have a tree ordinance. Again, to provide protection of public trees, and the better you protect our trees, the longer they'll last. It will provide shade, it will provide community, and we don't have a lot in place right now to protect our trees, whether it's internal projects, construction. When we first plant them in parks, we need to make sure we have these guidelines in place so our trees will thrive for many years to come. And we have a tree canopy that's not just young trees and old trees. We need something in the middle to sustain our tree canopy throughout the years. We also want to ensure that the trees are planted in the right places. Like I mentioned before, no utilities above or below. We don't want to have them planted in very narrow parkways because it doesn't allow the tree to expand, and we also end up heaving sidewalks and interrupting utilities. We also want to establish a guideline for tree care and proper planting, which that refers to. We want to have the trees in the right place, but we also want them planted properly. We don't want to plant it too deep. We want to have the correct trees for the climate that they're in and for the soil that they're in, and for basically so we can have water savings. If we plant the right trees, we don't have to spend a ton of money to ensure that they grow properly. And also, we want to obtain the Tree City USA designation, which I believe we have everything in place other than the tree ordinance. And I'll go over some of those items towards the end of this presentation. And again, a coordination with our sustainability office. Some of these things, once we coordinate with Lisa and our water conservation departments, and again, like I mentioned with Kathy, we can ensure that we plant the proper trees in the proper place because we're dealing with the departments that handle the water conservation. If we plant sustainable landscapes, then the trees will last a lot longer than what they have now at times. And then during our design review, Kathy and myself, Jimmy as well, we can identify any issues that we see regarding tree planting, again, whether it's in a narrow planter or in a place that a tree just shouldn't be planted that we have to remove 5 years later. So those are some of the things that we're trying to avoid by obtaining this ordinance. So I'm going to ask that Jimmy speak to some of our next slides because he deals with these items on a daily basis, the tree plantings, the areas that they shouldn't be in, those kinds of things. He can speak to them very clearly.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilor. I'm Jimmy Zabriskie. I'm the the community forester with the city. We've been working on this, well, I've been here 5 years. I know we presented to council back about 5 years ago. We think we have things in much better order now. And one of the things that we'd like to guide this, the American National Standards Institute has all kinds of information on how to properly maintain, care, and plant for trees, and that's the direction we want to go. We just want to make sure that when our department plants a tree, or that when other departments are working around our city trees, that they follow these standards. It's not rocket science. It's as with anything, there's a lot of wrong ways to do things, and there's one right way to do things. And since I've been doing this for many, many years, I've seen a lot of wrong ways that things are done, and we just want to do things the right way, and this will help guide us. It's just all in black and white, be very easy to follow. Me or Kathy will be the one that will look over plans and make sure that the trees that are being specified on the plans are ones that are good for our area. It seems like a lot of the plans that we get are from designers that are not in the area, and we have to nix some of those plants because something that might grow in Albuquerque won't do good here, or something that might grow good in Tucson won't do good here. So we want to make sure that we have oversight on that. In these two pictures on the slide, you can see on the pine trees, that's in one of our city parks, and the trees are planted right underneath power lines, and so they've been topped, and that's a horrible thing to do to a tree, especially an evergreen tree that has a strong central leader. And the other picture is the downtown plaza, and those tree planters were not constructed well, and we've had to go in and retrofit them. A lot of the trees grew into the sides of them, and so in the future, I and Kathy can look over these plans, look over the plant lists, and make sure that the trees are being planted properly, or that the trees are planted in correct locations, so we don't have the issues like we do in these two photographs. It's in the policy we have now, but since I've been here the last couple of years, I've been able to inspect plant materials before it gets planted. And in these two pictures, you can see in the photograph, the tree that was in a 24-inch box was in that container way too long, and the roots were beginning to grow around it. And that is not a good tree that you'd want to plant. Same with the other picture. That's a close-up of a very small diameter tree that when it was young in a nursery, the roots grew around in a circle, and eventually that tree is going to kill itself because it's called root girdling. It'll just choke itself. So this ordinance will help ensure that either I or Kathy will be able to inspect the plant material, specifically the trees, so that we select high-quality trees so we don't have to replace them in the future. And also, there'll be standards that are, like I say, it's in black and white on how to properly prune trees. If a tree's properly pruned, you don't notice it because it looks good. When a tree is not properly pruned, you see the stubs, and there's a lot of topping of trees that goes on, and this would help eliminate, well, we don't do it on our property now, but I have gotten upset with contractors who have done that on city trees. And this way, if we pass an ordinance, they'll be held liable for that, and hopefully it won't happen in the future. And this is an example of some construction that was done recently around one of the parking lots right on the corner of Water Street and Las Cruces. We didn't have an ordinance in place. The contractor piled debris around the tree, tore up the roots. That tree is no longer there. After about 2 years, it died. So if we have an ordinance passed, I think it would help eliminate this. And with that, I'll turn it back to Franco. Thank you.
Tree City USA designation. We do meet many of the criteria. Again, the only thing we're missing is the ordinance. So we do have a tree board or department responsible for public trees, which is our department. Sonia, as the department director, also weighs in on any kind of tree issue or tree care or tree safety problem. We also have our Parks and Rec board that we can bring things to for items to for discussion. We do have an Arbor Day observance and proclamation, and we also do a tree giveaway. This year we weren't able to because we didn't receive the grant because the supplier couldn't meet the amount of the supply that we needed for the trees. So, and also we have a community forestry program, which Jimmy, that's part of his daily duties, is overseeing that program, and the annual budget of at least $2 per capita, we do meet that through our tree purchases, through staff time, irrigation. We are meeting that criteria pretty easily, I would imagine. And the only thing we lack is a tree care ordinance. That's what we're trying to pass here, or get passed here. Before I go to discussion, I'd like to go back to one of the questions that the mayor had regarding the tree canopy increase. In our peak performance plan, we're responsible for planting 300 trees a year. We met that goal every year for the last 3 to 4 years. So we are increasing our tree canopy, but we also inventory the trees that we take out. And the reason we have to take out a lot of trees is because of improper planting, or they're interrupting utility or service. So we have both items documented, both the planting and the removal. So we are increasing our tree canopy yearly. Right now, we dropped it down to 250 trees a year because, again, we're running out of space to plant in our parks. But we're also looking at other options to increase the tree canopy on private property. So I just want to let you know that we do a really good job to increase our tree canopy, but we still need to do more.
Franco, thank you for that information. Is that net increase, or is that, if you planted 250 or 300 trees, but you had to get rid of 100 because they died, is that a net increase or that you're talking about?
Mayor and council members, right now, we're just looking at the number of 250 to 300 getting in. I think that, to get them in, I think that the reason that we do have to remove trees for those kind of issues that I mentioned, the utility interruptions and stuff, those end up becoming safety hazards, and we don't want those kind of trees on our property, but we do replace those as well. So we end up, let's say we plant 250 and take out 25. Later on in the year, we will replace that 25 that we took out with more trees from our inventory.
So you're saying this is a net?
Yes.
This is a net 250
Yes.
or 300 trees? Do you have an idea of where they're at?
Where we plant them? We plant them, Mayor and Council, we plant them citywide. We planted on trails recently. We plant in parks. We already have a plan on where to plant this planting season. We planted some in Veterans Park. We planted some at Pioneer. We planted citywide in every district.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McComo.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you all so much for this very informative presentation. I really appreciate learning from all three of you. Yes, I have a couple questions. So have you been working with I'm guessing you work with utilities closely on a lot of these things, but more specifically with the folks who are creating the water conservation plan? I feel like there's such a great intersection there with as we move forward in helping people reduce their use of grass on their lawns, right? Like helping them figure out what kind of trees to plant, where to plant, right? Like I feel like there's such a great connection with the water conservation plan. I'm wondering if you've talked to the folks at utilities.
Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, to answer your first question about utilities, we do work with utilities closely, especially when we have to remove a tree that's causing an issue. So we do have communication with utilities. When it comes to tree planting and the water conservation, we've recently started our monthly meetings again with Rhonda and water conservation. So we haven't really spoke a lot about the actual plan on my end, but that's something that Rhonda and I are both aware of, that if we're planting a lot of water-wise shrubs and trees, but we're planting too many of them, then we're really not saving water. So this is something that we've been discussing that we want to move forward on, to make sure that we plant the right trees, the right shrubs, and the right amount, so we're not wasting water.
Right.
And we're also looking at improving our irrigation setup to where we're not so close to sidewalks, so when we get that even a 2-mile-per-hour breeze, we're not spilling into the sidewalk, into the street. So we're looking at all those things, and I think that the more often that we meet, we'll get on the same page regarding these items, because we already are. We just need to continue to meet and discuss.
That's great. That's really great. And it seems like for the city internally, we have a lot of those plans in place. But I do think it's important that we also begin to inform and educate the public about, obviously, their use of water in an area like ours, but then additionally around trees and how a tree can actually improve your property price, but like what kind of trees to plant and all those kinds, and who to call before you plant a tree and those kinds of things. I think it's just really important as we begin talking about private, increasing the tree canopy on private property.
Yeah, definitely. For us, part of all this needs to be education to the public and staff, and the more we know, I think the more successful we'll have regarding tree health in the future.
Great. In terms of the ordinance, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but she had mentioned something around naming an authority. Who is the authority that would get to do the accountability on this? Have you all discussed who that would be?
Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, there would be several steps. We'll get an alert that there's an issue with the tree, whether it's something that was planted without our permission, something that needs to be taken down. There'll be several steps. It will get to me usually first, or a parks manager. Jimmy will weigh in, and then at the very end, if we can't come up with a solution or we need to alert council because it's in a high visibility, high use park, Sonia will also step in and provide guidance on that. So usually it's going to start in the department, on the department level, myself, managers, or Jimmy, but then we'll also get all the information to Sonia. So if you're asking for accountability, it would probably definitely be between Sonia and I.
Okay. I also was wondering if codes would need to be involved, and if they are, have you spoken to them?
Mayor, Councilor, it's the same as a water conservation department or section. We do speak with codes often, especially about hazardous trees, trees buckling sidewalks, things like that. So we haven't really discussed the accountability portion because it ends up in our lap. But when it comes to enforcement, they do help a lot, especially when it comes to trees encroaching different types of property, whether it's public or private. So they do visit with the homeowners pretty often.
Okay, great. On the Goban trails, like the mayor mentioned, I'm just curious. I know that obviously we have this contract with Elephant View Irrigation District. Is that an area we will be able to plant more trees on some of the new trails?
Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, regarding the Goban trails, the design is pretty well done, and we've accepted some of the trails already, but a lot of the trail areas, the shoulders are very narrow, 3 foot or maybe even less. So we couldn't get proper irrigation in there, and the trees wouldn't make it in a planting that small. So I don't think that we're going to see more trees planted on those trails.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. We don't want another plaza situation. And then my last question, a couple of years ago, I had some constituents reach out to me about a big tree on Amos Avenue in Hoagland, and it was huge and it would block traffic often. And so I, passed it on, and the tree was taken down, and I actually got notified that because of the tree was taken down, we were able to finish a part of the sidewalk there. And even though that was good, I actually really regret not coming to the forester first or through parks and having a wider discussion around, do we need to remove it, right? And so I'm curious and I think you have this internal sort of policy, but I do think as we move forward with this more concrete policy, if we can have a policy around if we have to remove a tree, then that we have to replant another tree somewhere else, right? Like I know you said that you sort of do that now, but I just think that should be written out somewhere concretely, that if a tree needs to come out for whatever reason, that we're actually going to replant a tree elsewhere close by.
Right, Mayor and Councilor, right now we do practice that. If we see a tree that's causing an issue on a sidewalk or utility, we won't plant another tree right there for the same reason. But we also practice 2 for 1, so we may plant it in a park very close to the area or somewhere else in the city that needs trees, but we'll replace that one 2 for 1.
Okay, thank you. I'm really excited to see this come through and to work with folks like all of you and all of the stewards on how we can improve private, on how we can push the private property owners to plant more trees in their areas. That sounds like an exciting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for this presentation. In my district, of course, I have a few different considerations that might, it sounds like, not necessarily apply to some of the information that we heard today. I have an area, Conway Avenue, that has a really well-matured tree canopy, and we had to remove about 16 to 20 trees due to safety issues. And granted, they were dead. There were some rats in them. It was a problem, a big safety problem. So we did have to remove. That is an area that has not seen any sort of replantation. It does have other considerations like power lines. However, it's a very marked area that this is like a fabric of this community. It's the one area that it is part of them for just the heart, the culture of the neighborhood, and of course property values, everything like that too. So how, when we look at this ordinance, are we going to address some of those issues too when we have these different types of communities? And I also recognize that these trees were along like EBID, so we were right next to Mesilla, so are we going to be working with other governmental agencies too?
Mayor and Councilor, that's a good question, and it's a difficult question because there's many different aspects to it. I remember that project because we had to work with several different departments, including Jimmy and myself. And I think that having an ordinance in place will really help because, as Alyssa mentioned, that an ordinance gives you direction and it gives you accountability. So in a situation like that, we would have to reach out to the actual property owners, whether it be EBID, if it's an easement with El Paso Electric, or if it belongs to us. And sit with those property owners to discuss what can go in there and what can thrive without creating an issue with utilities or anything else. One thing that I feel that could be done in situations like that is we wouldn't want to plant a tree of the same size again, but maybe we can plant something that can provide color and something that can provide, a nice aesthetic instead of having something that's just really huge that we're going to have to end up taking out or cutting down at some point. So I think that the ordinance can speak to ownership and property, and it can lead to a different conversation on what can actually be planted that will make it, and that we don't have to remove 5 years later. So I think that's how the ordinance can help something like that. But there is also other things to consider, again, like the utilities. I always lean towards safety. So if we're going to have something there that's overhead or below, or something where it might cause an erosion issue because the roots are coming outside the ground or something like that, I'll always look at the property and the safety aspect regarding that before I contact anybody. But again, the ordinance can speak to that. It will help us contact the property owners, and then we can make a plan moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And then looking at addressing it, looked like you said about 3% of the trees were on a city property. If we're looking to increase with that number, do we have any cost estimates on what we need to make sure we're budgeting for maintenance?
I think that, Mayor and Councilor, our biggest cost when it comes to planting trees is water. If there's not a water meter in place or a water source nearby, we're going to look at between $30,000 and $40,000 to get the water there just to plant maybe 10 trees. So when it comes to budgeting, we would have to know what land people are looking at trees, requesting trees to be planted on, and then we can come back with a dollar amount regarding water. We buy trees every year with our budget, and we store them in the nursery, not for too long, so because we don't want it to be root bound in the nursery. But some of the things that we do, people don't realize the cost. Again, like water, our utility increased throughout the year because we have to pay larger utility bills because we're watering more. So I think that we could provide a cost if we find out what land that we're going to actually put more trees on, because we have to decide what's there and what's not, especially regarding water and water meters. But we do have the budget already for trees, for supplies, for maintenance, for contract work regarding tree removal and limb removal. We already have those things in place. So that really does help, but it's the unknowns that really hurt us. That I'm not sure where you want to plant, so I have to look at the land before I can give you an estimate.
Okay, thank you for that, and I'll be reaching out to you about Conway. But thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Paranco. Are there any designated trees that are protected in the state of New Mexico? And I know in Los Angeles, where I grew up, we have the tree people, and the tree people determine which trees are to be protected no matter what. And the ones in my neighborhood are the sycamores, and I have a sycamore that I absolutely love, but it's caused the sidewalk to buckle, and then the homeowner is pretty much responsible for that. And I wouldn't want that tree down for anything in the world. But do we have anything that's designated and protected on private property? And if so, we need an ordinance. I mean, I hope the ordinance includes, I hope that we can get this by, I don't think Mr. Nichols or other people, yeah, Catherine is here. But I'd really like to see the ordinance include trees on homes that are being built. I don't know if we can impose that, but again, the health and safety issue might do that. And then to have protected species in that ordinance as well, irrespective of whether it's municipal on city land, municipal property, or private property. Is that being looked at?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, I'm going to ask that Alyssa or Jimmy answer the question regarding protected trees, but I would like to let you know that we're in the mindset right now of we don't want to take trees down unnecessarily, so if we have a tree that's blocking a flagpole, well, let's pay to move the flagpole instead of cut down the tree. So that's what we're looking at doing with this ordinance and these kinds of guidelines. So whether it's a protected tree or not, we're looking out for the safety and the health of the trees first, and if it's something that's interrupting utility or a sidewalk, then we'll look at taking it out. But regarding your question about protected trees, I feel Jimmy or Alyssa could answer better than me right now.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, thank you for your question. Yes, we do. And it's kind of dependent on, we don't have kind of statewide standards for tree protection, but we do based on different communities and different communities' ordinances. So if they have in place a preservation ordinance, that would protect those trees, and each community is different. So we could definitely have something in the ordinance that would protect based on historical value. A lot of communities have them for historical value, things around like a plaza that just if they can't be taken out, or that the contractor or local developer would have to pay a pretty hefty fine if they have to. Another thing is age, so cultural, historical value, age, and then certain species. We have lists of trees that are on our statewide and national register as well, and those trees are protected as well. But it's all based on the local communities, what the local communities want. So if that's something that the local community wants, is to protect these trees and to protect them for their cultural, historic, whatever factors, that's something that could be written in. Right now, I don't have the exact which cities have them. I know that Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Deming, Carlsbad, and El Paso have preservation ordinances, so certain trees with certain restrictions where they can't be taken down.
Okay, but and apropos of having an ordinance, if it could include preserving private property, say a tree is there already and it's a protected tree, and if it was to cause any damage, maybe there can be an ordinance. The ordinance can include that the city would maybe help. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's language like that, but it seems that if it's on private property, if it's a protected tree, and that tree, the roots, whatever, are causing major damage to sewer lines or whatever, that the city would help out. I don't know if that could be done.
Yeah, certain communities have for sure done that.
Okay.
And especially, sometimes it can be like income-based, and sometimes it can be like paying a fine as well. And if you really want to take down this heritage tree, you just have to pay a hefty fine and pay to replace the tree too. So it's just kind of how you word your ordinance, but that's definitely something that this ordinance could have the power to do, which currently y'all don't have.
So would it, I guess, in terms of all things being fair, would that ordinance allow a homeowner then, for good cause, to get rid of a heritage tree, a historical tree?
Yeah, usually they're written in place just because there are issues like safety or health, or if someone wants to construct a pool or something, there's usually kind of addendums and steps. So the first kind of level is that you want to protect these trees, but then if someone comes to you and it's like, I really can't live with this tree, I'm allergic to it, or it's going to fall on my house, you need to have an addendum in the ordinance for how that's going to be dealt with. So whether it's through the city pays for it, or the homeowner gets subsidized to take it out, or something like that. So it just depends on how you write your ordinance, but that's definitely something that can be added in for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Granillo, is that language that you're looking at?
We are looking at things like that, but again, we're looking at public property to start with. But I believe, just to start, we're looking at private property as well. But I think Catherine can provide more information regarding private property at this time.
Oh, great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. As all of you know, we've been working on Realize Las Cruces.
Excuse me, Catherine, I need you to state your name for the
Sure,
record.
sorry about that. Catherine Harrison Rogers, Senior Planner with the City of Las Cruces, for the record. As you all know, we are working on our Realize Las Cruces land development code. Part of that actually includes a whole section devoted to tree preservation. It would do all of the things that you were talking about specifically on private property. And yes, there is a clause in case there are any safety hazards or anything associated with said tree. But I did want to reassure you, yes, the language is already drafted and already written, so it's there. You're welcome.
So, Franco, I need some clarification. Has that been run through legal as far as the city helping to remove a tree from a person's private property? I would think that the anti-donation clause would come into play and wouldn't allow us to do that. I mean, we have residents who have bees in their yard, and we tell them, we can't help you. You call I know the fire department, there was a fellow that did that. But and other animals, I mean, we can provide them a trap, but we can't really do that. Has that been cleared through legal?
Mayor and council members, we don't assist people with removing trees on private property at all. What we'll do is if we get calls very often about private property, and we just don't disregard them. What we'll do is we'll give them some advice. Maybe we'll let them know what we see, but we don't assist them with removing or anything like that.
Okay, and then the other thing, and I can't remember the type of trees. Someone was, I don't know if Catherine or Alyssa alluded to it. I just remember years ago when I would knock on doors myself, and there was one particular tree that people were allergic to, and they said, can the city not allow these type of trees? And I can't remember what it is.
Mayor, it's probably a mulberry tree.
There you go.
Yeah.
Some cities don't allow those to be planted anymore.
Yeah.
Mulberry tree?
I believe it's mulberry, but we're not really in the practice of planting those either. They're very difficult to find anymore because of that reason.
Okay. So, I am interested in seeing the tree ordinance move forward, but I have to tell you, would be really cautious when it comes to private property. That's telling people what they can do on their own property, and it's kind of tough to do that. So, okay, good. Any other questions? Did any of you in the public have any comment you'd like to say? Okay. Okay. Well, seeing none, thank you for your help, and thank you for this presentation, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, well, it looks like that's it. So if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Beta?
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Beta, second by Councilor Bencomo, that we adjourn. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Beta?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes. Oh, and my mic's working again.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Coran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondara is absent, and Mayor.
Yes. Okay, we're adjourned. It's 2:43 p.m. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'm sorry, what? One of them. I don't keep them on. I don't keep record of them, but it's one of them. Okay, this is the agenda setting meeting for our December 5th, 2022 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent.
Number 2, non-consent.
2 non-consent.
3, non-consent.
3 non-consent,
4 consent,
4 consent,
5 non-consent,
5 non-consent,
6 consent,
6 consent,
7 consent,
7 consent,
8 non-consent,
8 non-consent,
9 non-consent,
9 non-consent,
10 consent,
10 consent,
11 non-consent,
11 non-consent,
12 non-consent,
12 non-consent,
13 non-consent,
13 non-consent,
14 non-consent,
14 non-consent,
and 15 non-consent.
15 non-consent.